So I think in this case, I'm really attracted to sort of the simplicity of this. So I'm going to paint in a way that supports that idea that this is really very simple. And I'm going to do this by sticking to my greens and just kind of using these green lines as a way to suggest a unified green background. And this is sort of a more meditative approach to painting this. And I can use the point of my brush to just carefully mosaic in different green and blue colors. Again, those cooler colors tend to recede into the background. They tend to push back in the space, and these sort of warm and hot colors tend to push forward within the space. So I can take advantage of that. This is an opportunity to practice controlling the flow of paint with your brush. And it's okay, you know, you'll overlap your lines a little bit and it's not the end of the world. The point is just to try to kind of fill in these spaces accurately. The more time that you spend on that pursuit, on doing that kind of thing, the better you'll get at it. So what something like this does, is it gives us some practice. And because these areas will dry out at different rates, you'll start to get sort of more integrity of each bit of color. They're not going to bleed into each other as much, and it'll have more of a mosaic-y feel to it. So I'm really just treating these parts of the painting like a coloring book, more or less. Only with a brush as my instrument, so it's a little harder to do. Try not to get frustrated with any mistakes that you make, because this is really an opportunity to start to learn some brush control and some water control, and not those are things that it takes a long time to really handle. So try not to expect too much from yourself if you're really new to this. It is hard to learn to control your paint. But that said, I'm going to give you some suggestions based on my own struggles with this. Number one, a lot of what will keep your paint from getting out of control has to do with the amount of water that you're using. So when I'm painting like this and I'm trying to keep my paint in a somewhat contained area and really trying to keep these bleeds from happening, I will scrape excess water off of my brush or blot excess water off of my brush. So those are two ways that I'm able to control the flow of my paint a little bit better. The other thing that I will do is I will try to not lock my wrist really rigidly, but lock it a little bit. So less of this kind of motion and more of this, where I'm moving my whole arm and not just my wrist or my hand. And I find that doing that, I'm able to better control where the paint goes. So in that first page that we made, where we really focused on flooding our page with as much paint as possible, as much water as possible, so we get flow. This is the opposite approach. We're trying to limit the motion of the paint within the space, and we're trying to keep the paper from getting flooded. Now again, I don't have to stick within the smallest outline space. I can choose to make a shape that extends outside of certain lines. Like I can incorporate and fold certain lines into my chosen shape. I don't have to just use the lines as drawn. I can use both approaches to this. That's something I can do, which will cut down considerably on the amount of time spent making these shapes, and it will cut down considerably on the amount of the number of times that you won't be successful in staying within your established lines. Some of these shapes are so small that with this size brush, there's just no hope that I'm going to be able to stay within the shape. So I can switch brushes, and I can be really careful about that if I want, or I can just, choose to extend the boundaries of a given shape to different drawn boundaries, larger also drawn boundaries within my drawing, like that. So this incorporates this. I'm not trying to stained glass window every single one of these little things. So something I want to show you is in regard to this kind of mistake where you've got some paint that gets somewhere you don't want it to be. I want to show you how you can deal with that. And sometimes this works really well, sometimes less well. But let's say I've got a little bit of staining, some stray paint. I can brush just some clean water over that and let it sit. Then what I will do is take a small piece of paper towel or tissue or something like that, and I'll just lift this up by pushing the tissue down into the paint and then lifting. And sometimes, yeah, there, it's letting go. Sometimes if I'm lucky, this will start to let go without too much rubbing. You don't want to rub too much with this paper. But that's like a reasonable kind of correction. It's not that important in this case, but I wanted to show how I deal with kind of stray paint marks I might not want.